Thank you, and welcome back to Psych Your Way to Success. I'm your host Claire. With me as always is
Heather Fife.
and today Heather has brought up a really great topic that is kind of lighthearted, but something that maybe we all could use a little bit of, and that's going to be a positive workplace and how to cultivate maybe a little bit more of a positive workplace and how you can contribute to that. So, I'm going to let Heather kind of take the lead from here. And thanks again for being with us. Don't forget that our podcast is about viewing topics from the view and scope and lens of an IO psychology practitioner or at any layer of leadership within your organization. All right. All right. Thanks again. And here's Heather.
All right. Well, before we started recording, you brought up such a good quote that
I did.
I
Well,
actually agree with too. Now, I'm going to try to repeat it, but you might even want to say it yourself. But the biggest illusion of communication is that it even happened, or is
in
that
the
what it
first place.
was?
Yeah.
In the first place, yeah.
The
Did I remember it?
You did. Yeah. The
Okay,
biggest
good.
illusion of communication is that it happened in the first place.
Exactly. And I love that. And that made me think of how are we defining a positive work culture? Because in my mind, it might be something different than what you might think. What do you
Yep.
think, Claire?
Absolutely. I think I mean, what makes me happy is not what makes everybody else happy. So positive is not positive for everybody. I think in society we have seen that as well.
Yeah, and that's why I think it is sort of like I kind of see a positive work culture as it's not a one size fits all. And it's
Yep.
not even a copying of somebody else's because the type of person, I always think of the difference between, I'll say positive work cultures at one point would have been Zappos.
Hmm.
People loved Zappos.
They did.
And another positive work culture in my mind is Nordstrom's. It's like a
Okay.
nice place to, but totally polarizing differences, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And, like the type of person who can be on the phone or typing on a computer all day, being excited and happy, needs to have that kind of work culture that Zappos had created,
Hmm.
where it was
Yep.
just fun and it was like kitschy and like you could do your own things and they had wild parties and this and that, right? And
Sure.
um, but at Nordstrom's, it's a different positive work culture, right? It's like, where it's, I'll say more refined and more, um, there's just you're out there selling clothes, you're standing all day. Like there's a
You're
lot
front
more.
facing.
Yeah. And so
Hmm.
it's not just, so and you're dealing with sometimes difficult customers, as you are on the phone too, but at least on the phone, there seems to be a little bit of distance.
Hmm.
So I kind of see that a positive work culture, in my opinion, in any setting, is one that has trust, open
Yes.
communication, and collaboration. I would say those are the three things, regardless of anything else.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Trust is probably one of the more, if not the top of a list that I would put it on because trust looks different to everybody. And whether it's you trusting your leadership or it's you trusting your coworker to be there for you, to support you, to be able to define and help you find boundaries of what your job and expectations are. I think that's a really great idea. And I mean, most of us, even if I think this was one of the conversations I had today with somebody else, trying to find something that fit me, right? It's not that there's all bad jobs out there. It's just some jobs I'm not right for. So liberating myself was probably the best thing I could have done for all of us. And it's not just because they were bad. It was, I wasn't right for the role.
Right.
So yeah.
Exactly. 100%. I agree. Like you just don't fit into every
No.
every
You've met
spot.
me. Come on, Heather. I certainly don't.
I didn't mean you personally, but also anybody. Me
Yes,
the
very
same. I
true.
have a very acquired taste. That's what I always say. I'm like a
Yep.
fine wine.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I get better with age though. So I don't know if I'm going to go all the way to a fine wine, but yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that as we're I mean, even as long as you and I have known each other, it's been, struggling to find where it is that we fit, right? And one of the things that I love about what we have the opportunity to learn in IO psychology has been understanding what positivity and the seeking of happiness and the seeking of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation and how we can use those things to really define what a positive workplace can be for us.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I couldn't agree more because it's also, yeah, there's so many things into the equation. It's not just what the workplace is, and it's really understanding what type of personality or person works well within the culture that you have designed.
Yep.
Because you add I in my younger years, I think I was not as like
Discerning.
refined and thoughtful maybe. And I always thought, oh, they're just a bad egg, you know what I mean? Like you're just like, oh, but now that I'm older, I've had more education behind me, I understand. I really don't think that people show up to work and like, I'm going to ruin this company today.
God, no, yeah, like very
I'm just
rarely,
going to
if
do the
ever.
worst job possible. you know?
Yeah.
And I think when I was running companies at a much younger age, I kind of was like, not that I really believe that 'cause that's like an extreme, but
Yeah.
almost like, oh, they're a bad egg. They're just not. And I understand. And even later on in my career, I started realizing it's generally my problem.
Mhm.
Maybe they're in the wrong position. Maybe they're at the wrong company. Maybe like there's so many options. And the best thing you can do as a leader, as a owner of a company or anything, is making sure people are in their right spot so they can thrive, or they're in the right
Mhm.
company, and like helping people get into those positions also creates a positive work culture.
Yeah.
Like the mentality of we have to keep all these great employees
In this
is,
one spot.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
negative. Actually a negative work culture. And really, you want to be like building people and expanding them and getting them into better positions. And I think sometimes it's not just about like the perks or what
Yeah.
the office looks like,
Or the pizza
or
party that everybody always has to have. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It can also exactly. It can also just be like, are we a positive work culture that promotes people or gets people to better spots in their lives?
Yeah.
Things like that. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think something that we often lose sight of is when something goes wrong, we really have instinctually, and as humans, we instantly go to pointing fingers, placing blame, figuring out why something went wrong is usually human error, which I'm not saying it's not human error, but we have to look at it differently initially and say that the majority of the time it's going to be process over people, and it's going to be, and it's said over and over again. My mentor would say this to us all of the time, and give people the benefit of the doubt. Well, I would hear that and I'd get frustrated and be like, I don't want to give anybody the benefit of the doubt, which sounds horrible now, but it's the fact that we haven't set people up to succeed. And when we're not doing that, you're not having people feel psychologically safe in the workplace. We're not having people be physically oftentimes safe in the workplace, especially if you're working one of those very physical jobs. And if we're not doing that, if we're not looking at it from a place of like process first What are the processes in place that have allowed them to make these decisions? Why are the decisions being made? And then asking them, what is it that could change in order to make it better? Right? Like have them part of the process change.
Yeah.
And man, I can't tell you how many times I could have benefited from somebody asking me, you know, how are you trained in order to do this job when this went wrong? What happened there? Like what did that look like for you? And maybe somewhere along the lines in this process of your training, in the process of what we have, in place right now, we went wrong and we trained you wrong to do it wrong. Right? Like set up to fail from the get.
Yeah,
Who knows?
exactly. And I think that's really interesting is a lot of times there's a lack of personal responsibility. You know,
Yeah.
I think that, what we were talking about at the beginning, communication is key. Even if you think you've trained someone well,
Right.
they may not understand what you mean by the words you're saying.
Yeah, and
So,
what level of training are they at? Do we need high direction, low support, high direction, high support? We have that age-old, quadrant like support for, an individual within an organization. Um, are we doing that for everybody? And especially in some of those areas that are not being as successful as we want them to be. Where are we starting in order to make corrections? Are we starting with blame? Or are we starting with understanding? So I think more often than not, when we see organizations that are starting with understanding rather than blame, you see a culture of positivity. You see a culture of upward trajectory. We see a culture of continuous improvement, and it's impressive.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. So, like, I mean, so we know what needs we need to do to create this positive, but how do you overcome challenges that arise when
So
trying to create a, because I would say, I mean, if you're lucky enough to work in an organization that has a positive work culture,
mhm.
that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But the challenge is to move a boat
Oh
in
my
a
gosh.
different direction when it's already going, because like we could talk about these altruistic, like, oh yeah, you just make it positive, and really that's much harder to do when everybody that's working there is used to a certain way. It's
Mhm.
people, it's hard to change. It's really, really hard to change.
Well, and the age old, I'm not to go back to another one of my sayings. I swear I'm full of them all the time. But culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Right.
The idea that we are going to make a cultural shift just by having a plan in place it is naive. We can only do so much until leadership is involved. And the people that are creating the culture of the company come from leadership. They are the ones upholding, they are the ones keeping themselves, if we're lucky, and others accountable. Um, and if that's not happening and they're not buying in, then you can have teams that have a really good positive attitude, but it becomes siloed. It really becomes compartmentalized without the acceptance from the top down. So you can create a wonderful culture within your team of an organization, even if the organization itself is maybe not as positive or as healthy as you would like it to be. um, and again, I'm going to dive back to start talking about processes before you start talking about people being the problem, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's how you start making those changes.
I like that a lot, actually. You're right. Like, really, maybe it's like being mindful of the changes you're implementing and taking the time to really create the structure and the foundation
Yeah.
before you try to move people and get buy-in.
Yeah.
Like have some of the people. I always think, when we first started the dermatology clinics, this culture
Mhm.
wasn't great. And we decided to shift the culture when we were well into like our fourth year, you know?
Oh, that's fun.
And so, one thing, the reason I think that it went well was because we had people buy into it.
So how are
So
you talking? How do you get people to buy in though? Like what did you do?
you have them be part of the process
Excellent.
and
Yeah.
the structure. So, and it was all volunteer. So it created the ability for people to do it on their off hours or even during work, you know, and have a voice and have like the ability to help move the boat. And I think it worked well. And I think when you have a big company like, or it wasn't even a big company, it was a small company, but when you have a company that's already going in a direction, creating a structure where it allows people to be involved in it, then they just get all in on it and it's really fun.
I, that's interesting. So I have a question for you. Say you were running an organization and somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know the culture of this company, like I'm quitting. The culture of this company is awful. I wish you the best of luck. I'm out." How do you take that information? Like, I know a lot of people that go into their exit interviews saying it's pointless for me to be honest because I don't want to burn a bridge. Or I am scared that, somebody's going to get in trouble if I say this. It's just not worth my time, blah, blah, blah. What would you say to those people? How would you take that information as like previous owner, but say that was your organization?
Well, I mean, I honestly, I mean, here's my 2 cents, but I always tell my kids sometimes it's not the information you're sharing, it's the tone of the information and
Awesome.
the
Okay.
intention behind it. So if somebody is angry or frustrated or blaming, nobody's going to hear that regardless of what the topic or subject is. But if it comes from a place of curiosity and wanting to like improve and all of those positive ways, then I think it is helpful and it is constructive. I think one of the thing I appreciate most about people is when they give me constructive feedback, where
Yeah.
it's right.
So what does it mean to you when somebody's even at an exit interview? I mean, it's not going to change anything for them. They're quitting. They're done. They're over it, right? Like, I mean, essentially, they're kind of complaining. And you just mentioned that complaining isn't good, but you want to hear it, don't you?
100%. But I also think that it's the way you say it. Like, there's no reason to, there's a difference between complaining and
Mhm.
giving feedback.
Right.
Very,
So
very
what's that
different.
difference for you?
Well, it's where there's actual things that you can do. So if you leave an interview and you say, the culture sucks, this has been the worst place I've ever worked. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, how does it suck? You know what I mean? So
Right. I may not have the answers to fix your culture, but I can say these things are wrong. So is that what you mean? Because that's not super constructive the way I thought I heard you originally say it. So I'm just trying to.
yeah, like I just think like if it's something that is tangible and that you could do like something that's tangible even if you can't do much about it,
Hmm.
awareness is the first step to changing anything, right?
Yep.
So maybe like if they were like, oh, this leader was toxic, well, what does that mean? How were they toxic? Like, what did you see? What did you observe? And then when you notice that, then now you're on high alert for whatever it is they just said, and you notice it more. You look at it differently. Um, it also depends on that employee, right? If that
Hmm.
employee was showing up late every day or wasn't doing their job, or you take everything with a grain of salt from them, right? I mean, like, but
Really?
I think so. If someone was not engaged in the company, I don't
Y-
think that they'll notice things, but maybe it
Oh,
could
this is.
be what?
I like this
It could be
because
the
I.
perspective of the employee that wasn't engaged. So that's a different, it's kind of what I'm saying is, oh, go ahead. Did you,
No,
like you have something to say?
I do. I'm really excited. So please continue. I want to hear you out.
Well, I just think it's like the perspective of that employee may not, it's kind of like when I got divorced, like my ex husband's perspective of my attitude was interesting. And
Hmm.
it actually did help me a ton, right? But if I thought about the situation I was in, was that part of the problem, right? Like there's lots of things going on at any one time. So understanding, that's why I'm saying like it depends on the employee, right? Like if
See, and I disagree. Like,
really,
yeah, and I only say this in certain circumstances. I think going root cause, I have seen incredibly amazing employees be disengaged, show up late to work, be disenfranchised with the job toward the end of their time because their leadership was so poor that it promoted that lifestyle of work ethic and work behavior. And so view them behaving the way they were was a symptom of the problem, which was the leadership. And we have really incredible employees in one location that time and time again kept leaving over and over and over again. And top brass kept saying things like, well, we're just not hiring well enough, or and that could be that could be one of the things. But certain people are just a reaction, just like you said in relationships. I think certain situations, I've been my worst self with certain people in relationships. Okay. And I think the exact same thing happens in workforce. So I
agreed.
think that even if that employee did not have the best track record, like maybe look deeper and say, maybe that behavior is just a symptom, right? Maybe the true issue is with somewhere along the line that they encountered either a leadership, a boss, a lead, like a manager, somebody that things went sideways. They could have been a great employee, and then all of a sudden you can look back and be like, oh, on this, around this time period, boom, their attendance was crap. And they ended up on warnings, and these things happen, or life events happened to them. And all of a sudden it just wasn't working. They tried to talk to their boss. Everybody was very rigid. Nothing was allowed to happen, or there was no give, no wiggle room. And they're like, this is the worst place ever. And then they quit. And so what you said was like, well, I'm going to look at their work history. And if it was, like, and it wasn't a full delve, it was like, were they showing up late to work? Were they not doing their job very well? I would go deeper than that and say, why?
Exactly. No, no, exactly. And that, I guess that's why I kind of brought up my ex-husband, is because in that situation, I couldn't be my best self. He couldn't be
Right.
his best self. It wasn't to do with him or me. It
Hmm.
was the combination of us, right? And lots of different things. And I think I couldn't agree more with you. It's not just that one person, it's everything. And that's why I
Hmm.
think this positive work culture is so difficult because there's so much to it. It's
There
that
is.
that is why it's so hard to move a big cruise ship as opposed to a little speedboat.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not us working on our own. We're not in a silo. And I think that is one of the things that when it comes down to it, I think your hiring process is going to be huge in being able to develop and cultivate this positive work culture. And then understanding that working with what you have in the moment, that, like you said, having everybody in the right place, and the right seat in the bus, the right position of the boat, whatever you want to call it, um, really helps too. But process over people, start with that. I mean, I couldn't promote that more if I tried. I talk about that a lot. So,
I
yeah.
agree. I couldn't agree more.
Well,
I
we
love
are
it.
at the end of our time. It went quick.
I mean, this is such a great topic. I definitely
I
think
know.
we could dive into this even more on another podcast because I think it'd be interesting too, between the two of us, to even just talk about examples of positive work cultures.
Let's do that next.
Yeah, I would love that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Any last words of advice?
No.
No. Okay.
I wish I did.
Well, on that note, I hope you guys all have a really wonderful weekend. Stay tuned. Do feel free to listen to us. Those likes really do help us. And then, of course, please find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We will talk to you later, and thanks again. See you later.
Bye.